Hi, everyone. Welcome to Blue Bench Podcast. My name is Gabby Crevitt. I'm the Communications Director with the Montana Democratic Party. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Land Tawney, a lifelong conservationist and passionate advocate for America's public lands. As the former president and CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Land has spent his career uniting hunters, anglers, and outdoor enthusiasts to protect the places that we love. He's here today to talk about what's at stake in the fight for public lands and how we can help defend them. Land, thank you for being on the show today.
Stoked to be here, Gabby.
Great. So many of us in the public lands advocacy space, like the Montana Democrats, who are strong advocates of public lands, we know who you are, we know of your work, but for those who might not be super familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. Lucky enough to grow up here in Montana, fifth generation. Both my parents were involved in conservation, the first full-time conservation lobbyist at the state legislature. My dad was actually executive director of the Democratic Party when I was born. But I've been around conservation like really literally since I was, came out the womb, and ended up getting a wildlife biology degree here at the University of Montana. And then I've had a 25-year career. You mentioned Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, which was one of the greatest joys of my life, working with not only folks here in Montana, but all across the country. Before that, I worked for the National Wildlife Federation for 8 years, and then the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership for 4 years before that. So it's been a lot of fun. I would say that now I'm, with American Hunters and Anglers, and we're a little bit different tool in the toolbox. So the organizations I mentioned before are C3s. And C3s, 501c3s, that's the tax status that the government gives them. But they are limited to only 20% of the overall budget that they can they work on issues, I would say, and directly lobby. And then they can't get involved in elections. And so a C4, which we're doing over here at American Hunters and Anglers, you can lobby as much as you want, and then you can use 49% of your money to get involved in elections. And so it's just another tool in the toolbox, I would say, a different boat going down the same river, wanting to do something different. But we're mostly on social media, and we're basically, we like to say we're breaking eggs so others can make omelets. We want to make sure that people know what is going on right now, because there is so much. And we don't have to worry about pleasing a membership, pleasing volunteers, pleasing corporate partners all across the country, which again, I think that model is awesome. But this is something different where we can say exactly what we think is going on and be unapologetic about it. And that's really what we've done for the last 6 months.
Totally. So I know you just came back from a trip to Washington, D.C., probably doing work for American Hunters and Anglers. And I
Yeah.
want to ask you about that. But first, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. I want to ask you why you think public lands are so important to our American identity, and what do they represent beyond recreational space?
Such a great question, and thank you for that. I think that, when Theodore Roosevelt really started this kind of conservation legacy for us back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was really to make sure that we had the best use of these public lands for the most amount of people for the longest amount of time. And so I think that is uniquely American. Like, the world is envious of what we have. And these places, it's now like he set aside 230 million acres. Theodore Roosevelt did himself, the first national wildlife refuge, the first national monument. He established 21 national forest reserves, which became our national forest. But that was 240 or 230 million acres. Now we have that has grown to 640 million acres, that no matter who you are, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, Republican, doesn't matter, who your parents are, how much money you have in your bank account, what the color of your skin is, it belongs to us all. And it's these places where we can recreate. So where we can go hunt, we can go fish, we can go pick huckleberries, pick morel mushrooms, we can kayak, mountain bike, do all sorts of things that we do here in Montana in the woods, but that belongs to everybody. I'm a fifth generation Montanan, but we don't have a ranch, but I have this huge public estate. And so I live like royalty. We all live like royalty. And so I think there's that recreation place in particular that is available to everybody. Everyone's on the same playing field. But then you look at the outdoor economy that goes along with that is sustainable. Nationwide, that's $1.2 trillion, which is absolutely amazing that now you can sustain, but you can grow. And then you have clean air and clean water. And clean air and clean water should be important to everybody. I think, especially here in Montana, the arid West, where water, what's the saying, I think, Gabby? It's like whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And so that clean water, right? Like I do not want that privatized and thinking somebody else owns our clean water. That would just, be devastating, I think, to the people of Montana, but all across the country. And then I think lastly, it's like these places that you can test yourselves and find grit and like you can escape, right? It's like I think during COVID in particular, people found out that the outdoors were a great place to find solace and get away from the craziness, find some peace. And I think that cannot be underestimated. And also, this is a place to really test ourselves in these, in modern times where maybe, we're sitting around on computers all the time. It's kind of nice to have something that's bigger than you. So that's kind of what's at stake, I would say. That's much bigger than like recreation, but it matters to everybody.
Totally. You've definitely already alluded to this, but why should people who maybe don't recreate as much as you and I and people in Montana, why should they care about public lands right now? Why should they be invested in this discussion that we're seeing happen in Washington right now?
I mean, I think that clean air and clean water matters to everybody, right? But I go back to that economy, that outdoor economy, and I think about hunting in particular, and here in Montana, but almost any rural place in America during hunting season, which let's say it's 3 months long. Like in some states, it's longer than that. Some of the states, it's a little bit shorter. But for these rural communities, it is like Christmas for 3 months. They literally, like, it's like there's so much money made in those 3 months because there's so many people in town, and they're going to the diners, they're going to the local grocery stores. They're sometimes working with outfitters. Like I think that rural economy depends really on that influx of money and just like kind of that energy, I would say as well. And so I think that should matter to every single person around the country. And and again, like there's not many things in America that feel like they're available to everybody, right? Like I think you have like freedom of speech, right, which is being questioned right now, which I'm stoked that people are fighting against that. I think due process is another one, but like their public lands have been this place where we all are on the same footing. And I think that is uniquely American and just shows who we are, that we want to protect these places for not just, a select few, but for everybody. And so I think that is just so goes our public lands, so goes, I would say, America in a lot of ways.
Great. Okay, I want to kind of bring the focus back to what we're seeing today, right now. Um, Threats to our public lands. What do you believe are the biggest threats to our public lands today? Are they political? Are they environmental? Are they both? What are you seeing right now?
A great question. I think in my 25-year career, I have not seen more pressure on our public lands than is happening right now. And that really relates to, I think, the political pressures in particular, Gabby. I think that, we've seen a new administration come in, we have a new Congress, and it's been nothing but shenanigans since they came in. And the list is very long. I'll give you a couple, but like when the House first, the U.S. House of Representatives first came into session, they passed some rules, which they always do, but one of the rules was that you didn't have to consider the value of public lands if you sold or transferred them. So they're saying that out loud, saying, hey, we can divest of these things and it's not that big of a deal. Then you have a Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, who keeps on talking about our public lands as a balance sheet, has gotten together with the Housing and Urban Development Secretary and said, we're going to sell off a bunch of public lands for affordable housing. You have the proposal that was in the House that was going to sell 500,000 acres of public land. That was just in Nevada and in Utah. And then you have this proposal by Mike Lee that is continued kind of getting bumped around, but it was north of 3 million acres at one point. That was Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. That was going to that's a proposal in the Senate for the big ugly bill, right? And so I think those, but then you also have, Utah petitioned the Supreme Court to arrest 18 million acres of Bureau of Land Management land to the state. And that did not work out, but they spent $3 million on an ad campaign to petition the Supreme Court, which nobody does, right? And so I paint this picture that that all these things are happening at the same time, not to mention like the doging of our public lands stewards that are on the front lines of conservation, the people that are helping with trail maintenance. I mean, majority of them have their red card, which is like a fire card, so they can help with like fires during the summer. Like the cutting of our agencies and the defunding of our agencies is just this pattern. And again, it's like they're trying to dismantle, so I would say that's like the cutting of employees. They're trying to defund it. So through budgets, the administration's budget that came out around public lands was just drastic reductions in every single one of these agencies that's already strapped for cash. And then the final one is to divest these lands. And that is just a fancy word for sell them the F off, right? And to me, that is a huge threat. Like I literally haven't seen it. Now I think you add in like climate change on top of that, right? Like, and like I mean one of my favorite rivers, and I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's here in Western Montana. And we started floating that this year. And usually this next Monday, which would be the last day that we can kind of float it, it would be at a certain cubic feet per second, which is like how much water's in there. And like we couldn't float it for the last week because there was not enough water in that river. And so like it's like there's real impacts on the ground that are happening climate wise. But I think this idea of the sale of public lands, if you get rid of public lands, you never get them back, right? And there's so many people that are chomping at the bit to buy these public lands, and we kind of know them here in Montana, and they can't wait to get another piece of what, we all actually have for ourselves right now.
Right. I want to ask you a little bit more about Senator Mike Lee, the reprehensible Senator Mike Lee's proposal.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up some old news and then I'll ask you to maybe catch us up, bring us up to speed. I do know there was an original proposal that seemed to actually have a special carve out for Montana, where magically Montana was not on this massive public lands sell off.
Yeah.
There were some people who were kind of celebrating it and some people who were on it just like, no, absolutely not. This is still not a good thing. Where did you land on all that? And where is that, I guess, currently with what Senator Mike Lee is now proposing?
So you're right. I mean, Senator Mike Lee is the number one, he's the like public enemy number one, I guess is the best way to say it, of like public lands. Like he is, since he's been in the Senate, he's been trying to sell public lands. This is the latest iteration. And so when he made this proposal, for 3.3 million acres, and it was 11 Western states, but Montana was not included. And this was, to me, I think that was like a ruse or a cute way to say that we're not going to sell it off. And Senator Daines, said that he was negotiating with Mike Lee, before this happened. Then it came out and he kind of tried to distance himself from it. But the map tells you everything. If you look at the maps, that have kind of come out about where these potential areas are, Montana's excluded from that. And it's because Senator Daines made a deal with the devil. Now, I would say I'm happy that our public lands here in Montana are not on that chopping block. But I would say a couple of things. One is that I hunt elk, especially in Southwest Montana. I spent a lot of time over in Idaho. And so those Idaho lands are just as important to those elk herds in Montana as our Montana lands are as well. I would say that. I would say that I recreate, not just here in Montana, though this is my home state and I love it so much. Like I recreate across the West because those lands belong to me just as much as they do anybody else. And then I would say that if you're going to sell public lands in 11 Western states and think that Montana is not going to be on the chopping block next, then you're smoking something that that is just absolutely crazy. Like that. This idea that you can carve it out once is that we're setting a precedence that we're going to be selling public lands to pay off tax breaks for billionaires. And so no matter how Senator Daines wants to play that, like he cut that deal. And I think that that's something that everybody should know.
Right, right. So it sounds like that specific deal is off the table right now. What are we looking at now for threats to these public lands? You were just in Washington. Did it have anything to do with this newer proposal they have?
Yeah, so Senator Mike Lee, it's been his proposal was ruled out by the parliamentarian, which is like this really nerdy way to say that they were illegal or at least they can't have it in this particular reconciliation bill. Lee then went back, changed that, took out Forest Service, kept in Bureau of Land Management, went from like 3.3 million acres down to 1.2. Parliamentarian last night said that's not good enough. And so he's rewriting it for the third time right now. And I who knows what's going to happen there. But I think that we will see that here in the next couple of days. It's a political football is being, bounced around. But I will say that I feel like, we're going to get through this, but you have Secretary Burgum again getting together with the Human Urban Development or in Housing and Urban Development Secretary, talking about how they're going to sell public lands. This fight is not over. Like it'll never be over, really, because there's so much money being made. Either people want to privatize it to develop it, right, to make a bunch of money for themselves, or they want to privatize it just so they can have a playground, right? They want to put their trophy home up there, come there, come to Montana twice a year or something, but have that little piece of heaven and keep us out. And so that's never going to go away. That pressure, I think it was Will Rogers that said, buy land because they're not making any more of it, And so like again, there's people that have the means that want to take this away from us. And so I think that threat's always going to be there. I think this summer is going to be chaotic. Like, I think it's gonna be super chaotic. I already mentioned kind of fires, but when I think about, you know, all the people that were cut on the front lines. I mean, I'll give an example of this place where we were fishing. They don't have a shuttle on the river right now because a new person got put in because they had more responsibilities, got put into a forest, couldn't do all the things they needed to do, and so now there's no shuttle for the river on that river because they couldn't approve it, and it's the only one that could be up there. And so that's just one example, but people are going to face, closed campgrounds, going to face more garbage, going to face, toilets that are in disarray, trails that are in a mess, even like some places shut down. So that's going to be problematic. And so I think, this idea, that we're in reconciliation budget right now, but the proposed budget that the president put on, especially for our public lands, is drastically reducing things. Congress has to, approve or do their own budget. It's a suggestion by the president. But I think that's going to be the next threat is really these budgets, because that is, again, part of the defund, dismantle, and then ultimately divest.
Okay. Our congressional delegation, particularly Senator Daines and Congressman Ryan Zinke, really fancy themselves to be public lands advocates. What do you think of that?
I guess I would say a couple things there. I have been pleased in the role that Mr. Zinke has played, both vocally around this issue, and I think helping with get it pulled out of the House version. That said, within the House version, there was still really bad stuff for public lands within that, right? And so you can't be a part-time lover, right? Like, you can't say you love public lands, stop the sale, which is absolutely important, right? Once you get rid of it, you never get it back. But the idea that we're going to defile these public lands too, right? They're proposing, more oil and gas development up on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. They're proposing a copper mine in the boundary waters of Minnesota. They're reducing regulations so that, drilling can happen without any kind of regulation. I think that is a piece. Zinke needs to be a full-time lover of our public lands. He can't be a part-time lover. And then when we go to Senator Daines, I've known Senator Daines for a long time, and he's been on the wrong side of this issue before. And it was back, I think it was right when he first became a senator. And there was this proposal by Senator Murkowski out of Alaska that was going to create a fund to help facilitate the sale of public lands. And this was on a Votorama style thing, super nerdy again. But Votorama's votes stay open for like 30 seconds to a minute. This vote, we were watching it online because Daines was the deciding vote, and it kept on going back and forth, back and forth. He and Murkowski could see her strong arming him. That vote was probably open for 20 minutes, and he ultimately voted yes. He voted yes to facilitate the sale of public lands, and so he got quite a bit of heat for that in Montana. The stove was really, really hot, but I think he listened to the people because it was politically salient, and ultimately, right now, he could be more of a leader, I think, in the Senate, telling leadership that there's no shape or form can this be in the Senate version. No matter what Mike Lee does to tweak this language, like, he should be out front saying we're going to kill it. And I think that he is getting there because the people are forcing him to do it. And so for all you people who've been making phone calls, you've been sending emails, you've been showing up to rallies, that pressure is working. Do not let up the gas, not just on this issue, but I think we need to continue, again, like the pressure on Senator Daines and Senator Zinke on not being part-time lovers. You got to be full-time lovers of public lands.
Totally. Okay, so public lands has always been a major discussion in Montana politics. Our Democrats used to seem to have the advantage in that space, but it really felt like public lands was not a I don't know, it wasn't a major topic of discussion or focus in the 2024 election. Do you have a similar read of that?
I think some of us tried to make it more of an issue. I think that the Democrats probably could have leaned into it a little bit heavier. I think that that's an issue that, again, if you like, public lands are so important, are such an important fabric of who we are as Montanans. It is still in the Republican platform here in Montana to sell public lands, just to be clear, or to transfer them to the states. That is ridiculous that is happening right now. And so could that have been, I think, more of an issue that the Democratic Party leaned into? I would say absolutely yes. And I think Senator Tester in particular was just such a champion, and to have him lose and have Montana lose him. I think that's even a better way to say it. Like, he lost that race, but Montana lost a champion, not only on this issue, but for the people of Montana. And I think that we as the Montana kind of public could have like leaned into that a little bit more. And I think the Democratic Party probably could have leaned into it a little bit more too.
Yeah, I think so too. I just remember, I don't know, like back in 2016, public lands was in like the top three of our discussion points. And boy, I
Uh,
don't even know if it made the top five. I mean, maybe top 10 this last election cycle.
and I think, going back to kind of what we talked about earlier, is that these public lands don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, right? Like they're open to us all. And so whether you are on one side of the aisle or the other, when people are threatening your public lands, which is happening right now, like people from all walks of life step up because they're pissed. And so I think it's definitely one for the Democratic Party to be leaning into, because I think that it speaks to that radical middle, right? Like this is an issue that we can agree upon, and let's talk about that more. And so that that I think that that more people understand that there is one party that's like helping, I think, perpetuate public lands. Right now there's a lot of people pushing back, but it's not just okay to say we stand up for we stand up against the sale of public lands. We need to stand up for the perpetuation of the funding that goes along with that, the people that are on the front lines of conservation, and then also just the laws that are in place, not to stop development, but to make it like so that it is not cause undue harm, right? And I think that's responsible development is what needs to happen, and I think that needs to be leaned into.
Okay. Well, I like to lean into a little bit of hopeful energy at the end. We get into some kind of grim conversations when we're talking about the current administration. So, what gives you hope for the future of public lands? Are emerging leaders or grassroots movements out there that are inspiring you?
Great question, and thank you for it. The glass is always half full at the Tawney house. But I would say that one of the things I'm seeing is just online, like people are pissed. And so what they're doing is that they're creating their own videos, right? And so this is people, again, hunters, anglers, kayakers, loggers, like ranchers. Like I just see so many different constituents from so many walks of life saying that this is a problem. And so we're uniting around an issue, which I think is awesome. Like that is like this positive kind of piece. And when I think about the history of conservation, in particular in this country, and I'll just give you one example, which is like the Dust Bowl, right? The Dust Bowl that I think everybody knows about, that was formed by unsustainable farming practices, that was wiping wildlife off this country. It was like we were losing all of our amazing kind of farmland because it was just literally blowing away. Is that out of that came some amazing things. Out of that came like came Pittman-Robertson Act, which like uses excise taxes from guns and ammunition and gives that money back to like state agencies. You got the duck stamp, which we all have to buy as hunters, and so that money goes back to the management of national wildlife refuges. You had farming practices that were changed. You had some good farm bill practices that were put into place. You have the National Wildlife Refuge System established. All these things kind of happen out of some bad. I would say maybe one more, like in the 60s when like rivers are on fire and Rachel Carson writes The Silent Spring to kind of wake people up. That's when you got the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and you got the Wilderness Act, you got the Land and Water Conservation Fund, you got the Endangered Species Act. And by the way, all those things were voted on by like 98-2. Who knows who the two were that were voting against these things, but they were overwhelmingly supported. And so I say that under pressure, time and time again, the people of America demand something better, and especially when it's around conservation. So I think all these pressures that are on us right now are uniting us. And so not only are we going to hopefully be able to push back against some of this bullshit, but at the same time, we're going to be able to use that momentum to do good things for the things that we love here in Montana, which is, our rivers and our lakes and our mountains that we all, recreate on and are such again, a fabric of our lives. So that's my glass half full, is that yes, things are really bad right now. I mean, they're the worst that they've been in my 25-year career. But I have some hope, and I really put that in the people. I think the people, I mean, they're amassing. You've seen the protests around the country, and that's what democracy is about. Like if if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And like the people are stepping up right now, and we're at the table. We're not going to win everything, but at least we're not going to have it done to us without us saying anything about it. And so I think that gives me some hope.
Great. Okay, so speaking of the people, what is your call to action for our listeners who want to get involved but don't know where to start?
That's rad. So I think, there's been a lot of like calls to action, right? And I think that emails are important. I think that we talk to chiefs of staff out in DC, and like that kind of gets lost a little bit. I think phone calls are important, but know that that's kind of a one-way street and they're just keeping score. I mentioned social media partly because that's half the people in America, or at least over half, are taking their news from social media, and they're taking that from trusted sources, which is their friends and family, which is what social media is, right? And so I think getting out and doing their own posts, like I talked about before, but then also going on your elected leaders' posts, Senator Daines, Senator Zinke, Mr. Sheehy, and Mr. Downing here in Montana in particular, and letting them know what you feel. It doesn't have to be a post about public lands. It can be about anything, but just get on there and I think talk there. I think talking to your friends, like I think that sometimes people are hesitant to bring up politics, but I think that this is the time to be talking. Talk to your dentist, talk to your doctor. I think that like anybody that will listen, because I think that's again like we the people still have a chance. And then I think some cool shit that's happening too is that not everybody wants to get on social media and do stuff, but maybe they're an artist and they want to draw something, right? A woman sent me some bumper stickers the other day that were absolutely rad. That she was just being creative. I've heard people creating music. Whatever your talent is, add it to this fight right now, because every single action matters. And so and saying that, a lot of people don't think their voice counts in this country anymore, and that's because you're not using it. And again, we might not win everything, but if we are not using those voices, we have no chance at all. So I would say to anybody, use your voice however you can, whether that's making phone calls, showing up online, talking to your friends, or doing something that you have talent with.
Great. Okay, Land, I have a really quick lightning round of questions for you. Just four quick questions.
Get it?
What is your favorite national park or wilderness area?
Wilderness, Bob Marshall, like by far. It's close to Missoula where I live. I'm not going to tell you exactly where I go in there, but I spent a lifetime exploring that place. I will never see it all. It is wild, and I love it.
Wonderful. Okay, dream hunting or fishing trip?
Oof. I think it's probably like there's so many places in Montana that I have not explored. I could say something exotic and say something up in Alaska or someplace else. But it's just probably exploring more of Montana. So, and especially for fishing, because there's so many streams and little creeks that I have not seen yet.
Okay, campfire meal. What's your go-to?
Campfire meal, what's my go-to? I would say I was just up in the woods, and we made some trout ceviche. And so
Oh,
um, it's pretty
nice.
rad. You catch a brown trout and you kill it on the river, and then you cut it up. And by the time you're off the river, you got this freshly made ceviche. So that's my go-to that I think is a little bit different, but also like utilizing what's on the ground.
Okay, last one. Favorite season to enjoy your public lands?
Oh God. I mean, it's all awesome, right? It's all awesome, but we're in June right now. And it's my favorite time of year. I think June and September, but June in particular is just my favorite time of year. Everything is still green. You get those rains once in a while. Everything smells really good. And the fish are hungry now because they're eating these big bugs, like bugs as big as my pinky, these stoneflies. And so watching those fish voraciously eat on top, that is like my favorite time of year.
Well, Land Tawney, thank you so much for joining the Blue Bench podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Gabby, appreciate it as well. Keep on using this platform to speak truth to power.
Awesome. Thanks again.